Before this day ends, there's something I need to say, not as a headline, not as a quote pulled out of context, but as a human being standing here with you. Most of what you think you know about me didn't come from conversations like this. It came from summaries, reactions, assumptions. A sentence here, a clip there. And over time, those fragments turn into a version of a person that feels complete, even when it isn't. The truth is, public narratives are efficient, but they're rarely accurate. They flatten complexity. They turn intention into speculation and conviction into controversy. You start to become an idea instead of a person. And once that happens, people stop listening, they start projecting. They argue with a character they've created, not with the voice behind it. I'm not here to complain about that. It comes with the territory of doing things that matter, things that are visible, things that challenge the status quo. But I do want to remind you of something important. Behind every opinion you've heard, there's a reasoning process. Behind every decision, there's doubt, calculation, risk. And behind every label, there's a human being still learning, still questioning, still trying to do better than yesterday. When you strip away the noise, what's left isn't a persona, it's a set of values. Curiosity, urgency, a belief that the future can be better if we're willing to build it, even when the process is messy and misunderstood. That's the voice I want you to hear, not louder, just clearer. Because before you judge the message, you should at least hear it from the source. There's another part of this story that rarely makes it into the conversation, the cost. Not the financial cost. That part is easy to measure. I'm talking about the personal cost of choosing to build things that don't exist yet, of aiming far enough into the future that failure is almost guaranteed along the way. Vision sounds glamorous from the outside, but living inside it is demanding. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes pieces of your life that you don't always get back. When you're chasing something ambitious, balance becomes a moving target. Long nights blur into early mornings. Weekends stop meaning what they used to mean. Relationships are tested not because they lack care, but because time and attention are finite resources. You miss moments. You carry decisions home in your head. Even when things aren't working, your mind stays restless, already focused on what could break next or what still isn't good enough. And here's the part people don't expect. The pressure doesn't come only from failure. It comes from responsibility. When people believe in what you're building, when their livelihoods and hopes are tied to it, walking away isn't an option. You keep going even when you're exhausted, even when the margin for error feels impossibly thin. That weight doesn't show up in product launches or interviews, but it's always there. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I chose this path, and I choose it again. But it matters to be honest about the trade-offs. Progress doesn't come free. Every meaningful leap forward asks for sacrifice, patience, and endurance long before it offers results. And if you want to build the future, you have to be willing to pay that price quietly. There's also something else that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's vulnerability. People tend to assume that confidence means certainty, that if you're building ambitious things, you must always feel sure about the outcome. That's not how it works. Doubt is part of the process. Fear is part of the process. There are moments, more than people realize, when you wonder if you're pushing too far, moving too fast, or missing something obvious. Failure isn't theoretical when you're living it. It's personal. It's watching something you believed in fall short, break, or get criticized before it has a chance to prove itself. And when that happens publicly, the weight is heavier. You don't just carry your own disappointment, you carry everyone else's expectations with it. That can be exhausting. It can make you question not just the decision, but yourself. But here's the truth: vulnerability isn't weakness, it's data. Every setback tells you something you didn't know before. Every mistake sharpens your thinking if you're willing to stay open instead of defensive. The hardest part is continuing when confidence feels thin and momentum feels fragile. That's where resilience is actually built, not when things are working, but when they aren't, and you keep showing up anyway. I've learned that strength isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it, to admit when something didn't work, to take responsibility, adjust, and try again with better information. That mindset doesn't come naturally. It's trained through experience, through failure, through moments where quitting would be easier than continuing. If there's one thing I want you to understand, it's this: progress is made by imperfect people willing to be honest about where they are and brave enough to move forward anyway. Because resilience isn't about never falling, it's about refusing to stay down. At some point, you realize that approval is a moving target. You can do something bold and be celebrated one day, then questioned the next, sometimes by the same people. If you let that define your direction, you'll never build anything meaningful. You'll spend your energy adjusting instead of advancing. That's a trap, and it's surprisingly easy to fall into when the feedback loop is constant and loud. Real progress asks for something different. It asks you to commit to a purpose that's bigger than applause, to make decisions based on first principles, long-term outcomes, and what actually moves the needle, not on whether it will be instantly understood or liked. When you're working on hard problems, misunderstanding isn't a possibility, it's a guarantee. New ideas always look wrong before they look obvious. There were moments when choosing the long view meant being uncomfortable in the short term. When criticism was sharp, when doubt was public, when it would have been easier to pivot towards something safer or more popular. But if you optimize for approval, you trade clarity for comfort. And comfort doesn't build the future, it preserves the present. Purpose gives you an anchor. It's what keeps you steady when opinions swing and narratives shift. It reminds you why you started when the noise gets louder than the signal. And it helps you separate useful feedback from distraction. Not all criticism is wrong, but not all criticism deserves control over your decisions. You don't need everyone to agree with you. You need to be aligned with what you're trying to achieve. If that alignment is solid, you can absorb the pressure without losing direction. Because the future isn't shaped by consensus. It's built by people willing to move forward without it. When everything around you is loud opinions, reactions, predictions, it becomes surprisingly hard to hear the one voice that actually matters. Not the crowd, not the critics, not even the praise. I'm talking about the quiet internal signal that tells you whether something is right or wrong, whether to keep going or stop, whether an idea has real potential or just looks good on the surface. That voice doesn't shout, it doesn't trend, and it's easy to ignore if you're not intentional about listening. Early on, I learned that innovation doesn't come from consensus. It comes from paying attention to that internal compass, especially when external feedback is conflicting or incomplete. There are moments when the data isn't clear yet, when the results haven't arrived, and when the only thing you have is conviction grounded in reasoning and experience. In those moments, applause is unreliable, but belief is essential. Quiet belief isn't blind optimism. It's built slowly through curiosity, study, failure, and iteration. It's knowing why you think something can work, even if you can't prove it immediately. And when the world reacts strongly, positively or negatively, that belief becomes your stabilizer. It keeps you from overcorrecting when praised and from collapsing when criticized. Listening inward doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means filtering noise so you can focus on what's actionable, what's true, and what actually moves progress forward. Some of the most important decisions are made in silence, late at night, early in the morning, when there's no audience and no validation, just responsibility. That's where growth really happens, not in public certainty, but in private clarity. And if you can learn to trust that inner voice, even when it feels lonely, you'll be able to move forward with consistency instead of hesitation. Because when the world gets loud, progress depends on who you listen to most. So here's where all of this comes together. At the end of the day, none of this matters if it stays theoretical. Ideas don't change the world by being discussed endlessly, they change it by being built. Too many people are waiting for certainty, permission, or the perfect moment. But the future doesn't reward spectators. It responds to those who step in, take responsibility, and start creating even when the picture isn't fully clear. I've learned that progress is rarely clean, it's iterative. You try, you fail, you adjust, and you try again. And that process isn't reserved for a special group of people. It's available to anyone willing to engage instead of comment, to test instead of judge, to build instead of wait. The gap between observing and doing is where momentum is lost, and that gap is entirely optional. Building doesn't always mean launching a company or inventing something new. Sometimes it means building a skill, a team, a solution to a problem right in front of you. Sometimes it means taking ownership where others pass responsibility along. What matters is the shift from passive to active, from opinion to execution. That's where confidence comes from, not from being right all the time, but from being involved. If you care about the future, don't just analyze it, participate in it. Ask better questions, learn fast, take risks that make sense. Accept that mistakes aren't a detour, they're part of the path. The people who shape what's next aren't waiting for clarity, they're creating it through action. Before this day ends, that's what I want you to take with you. Not my conclusions, but the reminder that your role isn't to watch progress happen. It's to help build it.